Please could we be given warning at the beginning of a programme if there's going to be anything about the Beatles, as all Beatle fans can make sure to listen, and have a chance to ring up other fans to make sure they are also listening.
Hi everybody, this is John here. This is Paul, George,
and Ringo.
And we're very happy to be on your program once again.
Welcome to the newest edition of your Beatles News Briefs podcast, show number 106, hosted by Steve Marinucci. Today we dive into a newly discovered treasure. Recently unearthed photos of George Harrison and Pattie Boyd's 1970 visit to Florida. In our first segment, Jeff Fisk from the Deerfield Beach Historical Society will preview his November 19th lecture on this event, along with photographer Tom Craig, who prepared the photos for display, and Beatles fan Margot Winnock of the Beatles in Florida website. In segment 2, we'll chat with Sarah Schmidt from the Meet the Beatles for Real website, who played a key role in locating these incredible pictures. And now, here's your host, veteran Beatles reporter Steve Marinucci.
Hello everybody, this is Steve Marinucci. Welcome to today's show. I think we have a good one today. It's about the recent discovery of some photos of George Harrison taken in 1970 in Florida. We'll hear from the people involved in the discovery. Let's get to it.
Hello everyone. I'm thrilled to introduce three people involved with this story about these found George Harrison photos in Florida. I'm going to introduce them one at a time. Tom Craig, photographer who prepared the photos for display. Hello, Tom.
Hi, how are you?
Jeff Fisk from the Deerfield Beach Historical Society. Jeff.
How you doing?
Welcome.
Thank you.
And finally, Margot Winnock, whose name I've known forever because she's a Beatle fan extraordinaire, but she's also involved with Beatles in Florida, and she actually was the one who brought this to my attention. And Margot, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much for your time today, and great to get into this juicy story.
The press release I have here is dated September. The story actually is a lot older than September. Jeff, do you want to start this off and say where this all started and you know, what?
For both Tom and I, it started in early 1971. You know, George and Pattie and Mel Evans came to Deerfield, stayed in Deerfield about 2 weeks in November of 70. And word started spreading around and pretty much it was just rumors. Tom heard the rumor. A lot of the surfing community heard the rumor. For years, no one really said anything about really seeing him. I was told a story. I was in 5th grade at the time, Ambrose School in Deerfield. During recess on the playground, I was told a story that two local surfers were at the beach, Pierce Gregory and his real name, Paul McCartney. Both these guys went to high school with my brother Vince, class of 72. The story was Paul lost his board and had to swim in to retrieve it. And he picks his board up and this fella's walking towards him and he looks at him and says, "Hey, you're George Harrison." And he said, "Well, yes, I am." And Paul said, "Well, you're not going to believe this, but I'm Paul McCartney." And Harrison was a little perturbed and turned around and walked away. That ended up not being true. When Paul and Pierce and my brother Vince had their 50th high school reunion, I'd already found some proof that he was in Deerfield by that time. And then these guys were like the big kahunas in Deerfield for the surfing community. So when I first talked to him, we spent an hour talking about waves and surfing. And then I had Paul alone and told him this story, and he smiled from year to year. And he said, it would have been great if it was me, you know, with my name, but he just knew about it like a lot of the other guys that were at the beach all the time.
So the story started, but nobody had photographs. Where were the photographs all this time?
Well, there were only 2 interviews done. Cynthia Sear, she was president of the Beatles fan club in Florida, and Reuben Bentoncourt was on the newspaper staff at Broward Community College. He tracked George down and Pattie with 2 assistants that they were with and did a short interview. It was in the college newspaper, the Phoenix newspaper, and then it was reprinted in the Fort Lauderdale News. Now that came out right after George left. Now, the pictures came from Lynn Radigan. She went over and interviewed him. Now, her article didn't come out until 1990, but she got a tip. She was a Beatles fanatic. Still to this day on her car, her license plate, and back then, Beatles. She's had that since the 70s. And she got a tip where George's aunt and uncle lived and that he was there. She went over and knocked on the office door, and Patty Boyd answered. She introduced herself, said, "Hi, I'm Lynn Radigan, and I'd like to meet George Harrison." Patty said, "Okay, I'll go get him." She got him, and he came out and sat in the courtyard with her for about 3 hours. And sometime early on, she got a chance to call her dad, and her dad came over with a camera and took these 18 pictures. He did take video too, and we haven't been able to get those. Apparently her little sister has them, but that's where the 18 photos came from. And these have not been, they were before this exhibit. They were not circulated at all. These were kept in a scrapbook that she had from back then, and only a few family members had ever seen these pictures. So that's where we got them from.
What's been done to try and get the video?
I have made a couple of calls to her sister, and apparently there's some kind of estrangement there. So, yeah, she's not communicating at all with us. But I would love to get the video. That would be priceless. But, yeah.
Wow. So anyways, you found out about the photos, and they kind of lay dormant for many, many years. Correct?
Yeah.
What made them come out?
Well, when I finally got a hold of Lynn, unfortunately, she's suffering from Alzheimer's. I found out what condo she lived in, and the complex with about 5 buildings. I couldn't go up and knock on the door. The only thing I could do is on the intercom system. I kept leaving messages, and I even put some handwritten messages on her mailbox and never got an answer. So 2.5 years went by, and then Tom had alerted me in, I think it was early January of 2024, that Patty Boyd was having a book signing up in Palm Beach at the Four Arts. So we went up to that, and I showed Patty what I had at the time. And after seeing her, and she remembered a little bit, she gave us a couple of little pointers on her memories that added to the story. But after that, I was super motivated. I got to figure out a way to get to this Lynn Radigan so I can interview her. So I came up with a new strategy, and that was the maintenance man. The maintenance man knows everybody. He's going to know what's going on in all the buildings. So I drove back over to the condo complex. I saw a resident. I talked to him. He gave me the maintenance man's telephone number. I called him up, and that's when I found out that she had Alzheimer's, the beginning of it. She had a friend of hers that was her caretaker, Vincent Gerardo. He said, "I'll forward this information to him, and maybe you two can get together and do an interview." I thanked the fella, and I started leaving the complex. I was driving out, and I saw the first resident that I had talked to, and I stopped to thank him, and he was talking to Vincent Gerardo. And he and I struck up a conversation, set a date for like a week later. I went over and was able to sit with him and Lynn for probably about 2 hours. And just out of the blue, Lynn said, "Hey, Vincent, can you go get that scrapbook from the pictures I have?" And voila. I mean, then this whole thing started, because now we not only had, somebody testifying that this did happen, but we had actual proof of it, which is pretty cool. And these pictures Tom did the restoration on them, and he didn't have to do a whole lot. They were really incredible. Very clean pictures.
When you met Patty the first time, or at the book signing, did she remember being there? Did she remember in details of the whole thing?
Well, at that point in time, I had the 2 articles, the Rubin article from BCC, and I had Lynn's, and I had 3 pictures and that I had found on Meet the Beatles for Real, Sarah Schmidt's site. So I showed her the articles. She was foggy. I showed her the first picture, which is one of George in that same courtyard with a group of people. Still not really remembered it. Then there was a shot of George down on his knees petting a pet mountain lion. And still it didn't hit her. The last picture was her standing over the mountain lion with her arms folded like this. And as soon as she saw that picture, you could see it in her face. She's like, oh my God. Now I remember going down there. She said on that day, it was because in the comments on Meet the Beatles for Real, it said that a fellow that was staying there at the Gregg Apartments said that it was a friend of the family that brought over their pet mountain lion in their station wagon. Well, Patty said it was a friend of Louise, his sister, Louise Harrison. She drove over from Sarasota, and it was a friend of hers that brought the mountain lion. And when she saw her picture, she said, I definitely remember that because George went down like it was somebody's pet cat and was just petting the thing and wasn't scared at all. She goes, I was terrified. I wasn't going to touch that thing for anything. Yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable. Tom, when you got the pictures, what did you have to do?
Well, when I first saw them, they were in two little 4x4 comb-bound brag books, like you would get back at that time from the drugstore or the photo lab. They were black and white Kodak Instamatic photographs.
Oh my.
But they were amazing. I mean, they were in great shape. They had been stored well enough that time had not taken any kind of toll on them. And they were basically all good prints because I treated them as historical documents. I brought my scanner over to her apartment and I scanned them at high resolution. And basically all I did to them was remove any dust spots. I kept the original border because they were 4x4 bordered black and white prints. I kept the original border and I cleaned the border so that it looked even and a nice white like it would have back in the day. And other than that, I took care of any dust spots that were in the sky or anywhere on the photo. And I left it at that because, you know, I'm not going to put these through AI and have George popping off the photo like he was just here. These are historical documents. So that's really all I had to do to them. It was relatively easy because the originals were good to begin with. So I've done this for a long, long time, and I've had to work on photos that are not nearly as in good a shape as these are, but these were, for all intents and purposes, pristine.
Great. Wonderful. Margo, you were the one that told me about this whole thing. You know, we've known each other. I know you've been a Beatle fan forever. First of all, how did you find out about this? And what does it mean to you as a Beatle fan?
Yeah, Tom got a hold of me before Patty was coming on the book tour, and we started talking about it because he knew my Beatles in Florida Facebook page. I had set up some years ago in order to write a book. Someone scooped me, by the way, Bob Keeling, who wrote the terrific Good Day Sunshine State about the time that the Beatles spent in Miami Beach, specifically in 1964, as they were filming the Ed Sullivan Show, the second one. But Tom got a hold of me because of the page, and we just started talking and hit it off, and the opportunity to meet them at the Beatles on the Beach event, which is like Florida's only Beatles-related celebration that goes on every year. We met there. We actually, they do have an art space there. And so we kind of talked about what this would look like if we had the opportunity to display photos that they were talking. We couldn't wait to get our eyes on them. Tom Hedgeff gave us a little bit of a sneak peek there. But to see them all, the way that these folks have created just a beautiful display exhibition like you would see in a gallery. And they've added for what was on display at the Deerfield Beach Historical Society was a timeline of everything that happened in November 1970 for George. And it was really just a tremendous year for him with all the changes and purchasing Friar Park. Obviously, the breakup of the Beatles had happened. You know, the death of his mom, which gave way to the title, All Things Must Pass, was the inspiration for that very song. And then, of course, the album itself that would come out, and no longer would anyone doubt that he was a strong songwriter that just didn't get his chance with Lennon and
Right.
McCartney up front, of course. So I think this exhibition sets in time an interesting place for George to be sort of savoring the moment in between major life changes for him. And with the release of All Things Must Pass, again, the tremendous musicianship that we all got exposed to, there's just nothing else. For fans, this is incredible. I mean, Beatlemania is alive and well. I'm a second generation Beatle fan, and we saw a lot of folks and families, more than 600 people, as I understand it, turned up to see these photos last weekend. And so it's just wonderful to see the dedication of, saving, as Tom described, these documents that do have historical value and do contribute to the collective memory of what we love. And I know the hope is that through exposure in the press like this discussion, that others will come forward who knew about the time that George spent in Deerfield Beach and, maybe helped maintain that secret, but maybe knew a little bit more than we know or also have photos. So it's fascinating to see a chapter like this unearthed, and it's more than a curiosity. It's really just a point of pride, I think, that folks in Florida feel even closer to the Beatles after the release of these photos.
What's coming up on the 19th? That's what we're here to really talk about.
I'm going to be doing a lecture at the old schoolhouse right by City Hall in Deerfield Beach. And it'll be about how this whole process happened of, uncovering this story. And it's pretty amazing, really. I mean, I told a story that was only partially true for nearly 50 years. But when COVID hit, I'm my family's historian too. And my grandfather was pretty much a Forrest Gump type of person. And I've got, pictures, I've got letters, I've got documents, artifacts from all the things he did and a lot of other family members. This story for 50 years, I didn't have anything. Anytime I would tell the story that I was told, I would either get, I'd never heard that, or I heard a rumor that he was here. So when COVID hit, it was either prove it or disprove it. And that's when I dug my heels in and started really looking for facts and artifacts and stuff.
Okay. Is anybody else going to be involved, Jeff, besides you at the lecture, or is it just you?
I've got a bunch of pictures and stuff that I'll be showing. I'll do a slideshow and tell about pretty much sometimes month by month how things happened.
And we were talking earlier about what the future holds for the photographs. There's no certainty that there's going to be a permanent exhibition as of this moment, correct?
Well, we never thought about that until after the photo exhibit. It's been such a big success and we've had so much interest. We're thinking about doing some kind of permanent installation somewhere. Daniel Hartwell, who does the Beatles on the Beach event, a 3-day event, has already expressed interest and he wants us to display that next year. And I'll probably do a lecture there too on the uncovering of the story.
I believe that comes up in March. I forget the 3 dates.
Like mid-March, I think.
Is it
Yeah.
mid-March? I thought.
Somewhere around the 12th to the 15th,
Okay.
somewhere in that vicinity.
But yeah, I mean, that's going to be really interesting. Hopefully something can be arranged where those photographs are going to be around
Mm-hmm.
permanently. And so
I mean, it's all about helping the Historical Society.
is there any thoughts of getting photos put in a book and somebody, maybe doing a book on this thing?
That's because there's a whole lot more to the story. Along the journey of uncovering this, we found other stories of the Harrison family visiting Deerfield Beach and a little more. I don't want to give away too much because I've got the lecture next week, but a little more Beatles connection to Deerfield. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Really? I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to be there to hear the lecture. Are you going to stream it by chance?
We're going to try to stream it on our Facebook page, Deerfield Beach Historical Society. We are going to videotape it also.
Okay. And that's going to be, in case anybody wants to pick up the stream, what time is that going to be on the 19th?
It'll be from 7:00 till 8:00 on Wednesday, the 19th.
And that's Eastern time for anybody
Correct.
who needs to know that. Okay.
Yep.
Anybody want to say anything else? I mean, this whole thing is really exciting.
You know, the thing is about this, when you look at these 18 pictures, and you can see he's in a thought process the whole time. And, you know, he had one heck of a year. Tom came up with the idea to do the month by month, and we both added facts to that. But, you know, when you read through it, like when I read through it several times, I'd get to about April and I was tired. I don't know how he survived. But when he was here, you know, My Sweet Lord was just released towards the end of his stay here. All Things Must Pass was just released after he left. He didn't know. Even though he's a great artist, he was in the most popular rock band at that period of time in history. He didn't know. I mean, he was still kind of, is this going to be a hit or is it going to be a flop? And you don't know. And plus the emotions also of him seeing his aunt and uncle for the first time. This was his mom's little brother. So his mom passed in July, and it was the first time he got to spend time with his uncle and aunt and his sister since his mom died.
It was Tom's idea, I believe, to create a real groovy Fillmore-like poster that took one of the images you'll see to promote the event. And those posters have been on display all over South Florida and helped drive the interest.
What's really interesting about all this is he was such a private person. I mean, there had been numerous stories of how he wasn't always open to being a star. In other words, just showing his fame off. For example, Paul was, you know, but the fact that you have these photographs of him in these kind of private moments is really wonderful. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's written out there. I forget where we found it, but about how much it meant to him to have these family getaways that were literally away from everything and off the radar completely and all of that. And that's what this is. I mean, what was it, Jeff? About 10,000 people in Deerfield in 1970?
About 10,000.
Yeah. So it's a sleepy little town at the very north end of Broward County, far away from Miami. Lynn Radigan, that 18-year-old girl who tracked him down, spent this 3 hours with him as her dad took these photos.
And she looks happy. She looks very happy.
Yeah.
In her article, she self-proclaimed herself as a Beatles maniac. But when she was interviewed, she was 38. The article that came out was 20 years later. So she was 18 when that happened. And she said, I'm not as much of a Beatles maniac now, but I think she still is. Yeah. She absolutely, even with her condition, talking to her, oh my gosh, she was spot on.
Yeah.
Lights
up telling the story. So it's nice to see that.
Yeah, it really, really is.
And I mean, after 55 years, what new is there in the Beatles world? First of all, when we were fortunate enough for Margot to introduce us to some of the folks from Sirius and along with Joe Johnson, and to have a few minutes of their time to unveil that first photo I showed you. And I told Jeff, I said, don't worry about me getting it out of the bag. All I want you to do is focus on their faces. And as I'm pulling it up out of the bag, this 24 by 24 print, I start to see eyes get a little rounder, mouths kind of change position. And then when it's completely out of the bag, I don't know who it was, but one of them goes, wow. And they all take like 2 or 3 steps forward.
Yeah.
So that's when I said to Jeff, I said, we got something. Because if you can impress those folks.
You most definitely do. The quality on those things is great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we're very fortunate.
Like I said, the fact that he was such a private guy and he allowed, those pictures to be taken is fantastic.
Well, and look at it this way too, Steve. He had just birthed his baby, but it hadn't come home from the hospital yet.
Okay.
Meaning it hadn't been released, and we have that timeline narrowed down to somewhere between November 2nd and November 21st, because we have photographic documentation of him arriving in New York on the 28th of October, him delivering the Masters, a photo of him, Phil Spector, and Barry Patterson from Apple. And we have photographic evidence of him and Patty back in New York on the 24th, where they attended a Badfinger concert and he introduced Badfinger. And that was the day that My Sweet Lord was released. So somewhere in that window, he spent 10 to 14 days in Deerfield Beach, unrecognized, unbothered. And after what a tumultuous year he had, and then it didn't even end there. It didn't end until the last day of the year with McCartney filing the lawsuit to disband the Beatles partnership.
Right.
And then it was official.
Folks, this has really been really wonderful that we've been able to talk about this. Thank you all for doing this. Best of luck with these. And I hope that something happens to where, this becomes something that we can all enjoy, for a long time. But yeah, let's hope. Again, Jeff Fisk, Margot Winnick, and Tom Craig, thank you again. And we'll be right back, folks.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
Here's the second part of our show with Sarah Schmidt of the Meet the Beatles for Real website, talking about her role in the discovery of these photos.
Hello again, folks, and I am with somebody who everybody should know, Sarah Schmidt, who runs the Meet the Beatles for Real, and also the author of Dear Beatle People, the story of the Beatles North American fan club. The reason why we're here is because, as you heard in the discussion with Margot, Tom, and Jeff, her name kept coming up. I wanted to where she came into this whole story because it's such a great story of finding those photos. Hello, Sarah. Hello.
Hi, Steve. It's nice to be talking to you.
Like I said, your name kept coming up in the discussion about the George Harrison photos. Where did you come into this? How did you hear about them? What did you do?
I was researching for my book, Dear Beatle People, which is a story of the Beatles fan clubs in the United States and Canada. And I was digging through a bunch of old newspaper clippings, and I found a little story written by a reporter from some newspaper in Florida where he talks about the president of the Beatles fan club in that area, or the area's secretary. Her name was Claudette. The two of them had seen George Harrison on the beach in November 1970. And he had written a few weeks later about they met him, and he said, keep this a secret until I'm gone. So our little article got written. I included that story in my book because it had to do with the fan club member that met one of the Beatles. So that's how I found out about George being in Florida in the first place. But past that, just my own curiosity as the amateur Beatles historian that I am, I wanted to dig a little deeper, and I had never heard about George being in Florida. I knew he had been to the United States during that time with All Things Must Pass, and the tapes, and there's all sorts of pictures of him and Patty at the airport from that time period. But I didn't know they went to Florida. That was new news to me. So I just started digging online, and I found these kind of blurry photos of George and Patty with a panther of all things at the house in Florida. And so I didn't know anything about, very little information. Just this was during this Florida trip sometime in November of 1970. And I put them on my site, Meet the Beatles for Real, because that's the kind of stories and pictures I like to share, rare things and not posed photos, but snapshots and things. And I put it up there and didn't really think much more of it until Tom contacted me, and he was all excited about the pictures and things that he was discovering. And really, I had kind of forgotten about it because it had been up there for a couple of years before I'd heard from him.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it was like 2020 maybe when I put those up there.
Mm.
That was around the time I would have been working on that time in the book. So yeah. I really didn't have a whole lot of information, but I'm glad that everybody in Florida there was able to dig deeper than I did. I felt like at the time when I found those pictures, along with the little article, that was as far as I could go in the story. And I moved on to whatever my next little tidbit of beetle trivia that I went to find.
Would you say that your contact with Tom had a lot to do with the pictures surfacing and getting a wider distribution?
Yes.
Or
yeah.
not distribution, really. That's not the right word.
Right. But
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
He actually reached out to my parents because that was the only number he could find. It's kind of funny because, I haven't lived at my parents' house in 30 years. So my parents they're like, yeah, we got a message from some guy about something with the Beatles. I guess it was still out there online somewhere for me. So kind of a roundabout way of getting a hold of me.
It's just fascinating that this whole thing happened at all. I mean, in the pictures, as I was saying this morning, he was such a private guy. He wasn't somebody who liked to make his fame known. He didn't go around blabbing that he was famous. The Quiet Beetle thing was kind of true. He was very humble in that respect.
Oh, yeah. And he didn't want anyone to know at the time. Like, he didn't want this girl from the fan club to go tell all the fan club members, we got a Beatle here in town. And that all of a sudden kind of ruined his little getaway trip.
Yeah. And how they managed to keep that quiet, I mean, that was pretty amazing. That's something I'm still wondering about. I mean, when you have somebody like George Harrison in a small town, you would think the word gets out, but it didn't.
Oh, and that reporter and that girl really could make or break the whole trip for him.
When reporters find stories like that, especially nice stories, they'll say something. And this is such a wonderful story that, he and Patty were there. And they also talked about the
lions that they were. I didn't even know what kind of animals they were.
They were both mountain lions and panthers.
Okay.
He talked more about that in the interview that we did.
Yeah, it was real. They're very odd pictures because you just don't expect wild animals to be in a picture with the beetle.
Right. I mean, even if you're not a beetle, you don't expect it to be hanging around with a panther or a mountain lion. But he apparently had no problem with it, or he was very relaxed. I guess maybe that's the better thing to say, because I'm not sure I could have been relaxed in that.
I don't think I would have been.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's great that you were involved. Is there anything you want to tell me about what you're doing since you're here?
I'm always looking for stories of people who've met the Beatles, one of the Beatles in person. Right now, I'm focusing on fans who have met one of the Beatles or involved in the Beatles world in the 70s. That's kind of where I'm focusing right now. So if anybody has any stories about meeting the Beatles or going to a Wings concert in the 70s, that's the stories I'm collecting right now.
It adds a little to the story. And
yeah, it's neat.
You mentioned a lot. So, I wondered, how much you were involved in it.
But they said if I didn't find that article and found the pictures, they would have never known about it. So
that's good.
Somebody would have found it. I mean, it's not like it was a big secret. It just you had to dig and look for this stuff.
We're digging.
Thanks very much for listening to our podcast today. If you enjoyed our program, we'd really appreciate a positive review at the place where you get your podcasts. Apple and Google love positive reviews, and it really helps us. If you don't already, please subscribe to our show so you'll get our newest shows right away. We have some great shows coming up. We would love to hear your suggestions for the show, so please write to us at BeatlesNewsBriefs@gmail.com or catch us online on Facebook in our Beatles News and Information group. If you've missed any of our past shows, you can hear them at marinucci.podbean.com. And please tell your friends about us. We appreciate you all for listening. Now here again is Steve Marinucci.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. If you're in the area and you want to attend the lecture that Jeff Fisk is giving on the George Harrison photos, it'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern, November 19th, at the 1920 Old Schoolhouse at 323 Northeast Eller Street in Deerfield Beach. That's 323 Northeast Eller Street in Deerfield Beach. And again, that's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And they plan to stream it on the Deerfield Beach Historical Society.com website. That's Deerfield Beach Historical Society.com website. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Until then, this is Steve Marinucci saying,
Be seeing you.